My name is Juliet Birch, and I'm the co-curator of the short films programs for Filmfest DC. We have representation of 2 films for this conversation. Representing ACUITZERAMO, please welcome director Miguel Ángel Caballero. Miguel is a writer, director, actor, and producer in both theater and film. He has completed 2 feature films. He grew up in both Mexico and the US, and his hometown in Mexico is ACUITZERAMO, the setting for this film. Additionally, from ACUITZERAMO, we are delighted to have with us executive producer and actor Luis Aldana, who played Anthony. Luis went to UCLA with Miguel and studied American literature and culture. He has an extensive background in both theater and film, and he has been collaborating with Miguel for over 20 years. From State of Grace, we are very pleased to have with us Lourdes Portillo. Lourdes has been making films about Latin American, Mexican, and Chicano-Chicana experiences for over 40 years. Her 1986 film, The Mothers of Plaza de Mayo, was nominated for an Academy Award. She is originally from Chihuahua in northern Mexico and moved to Los Angeles as a teenager. In State of Grace, the spirit of her parents and grandparents helped Lourdes in a moment of crisis and uncertainty. In ACUITZERAMO, Salvatore and Anthony encounter the spirit and memory of Roberto while they are in mourning. I wanted to start the questions by asking you about the short film format. Both of you have experience in long films, and the short film is often a calling card for a longer film, something that is the project of somebody who's moving towards longer films. So I'm interested in why at this point of your career you chose to make a short film. And why don't we begin with Lourdes?
Okay, I got sick and I had cancer, and it took a long time for me to get to a point where I wanted to make something. It was very difficult, you know, getting well and stuff. So once I felt better, you know, I realized that I couldn't do what I was used to doing. The work that I do is documentary, so it's very arduous. And I just was at a loss in a way. And I've always had very wonderful, well, I thought they were wonderful, you know, dreams. So I thought that these dreams were speaking to me in some way, you know. And I thought, well, I'll try to make, you know, a short film about one of my dreams. And this one dream was particularly touching to me because who came back to me was my grandmother and my parents. And, you know, it was a very inspiring dream. And I didn't do the animation. My kind of nephew-in-law, you know, is an artist, and he did the animation. This film took longer than any film I've ever made. It
Wow.
took 10 years, you know, 10 years because I wasn't in good health, and 10 years because animation is very slow. Right. You know, that was 2 things. And then I had to fundraise and all that. I mean, I didn't realize what I was getting into, obviously. So that's basically the reason that I made the film, you know. And I felt, and after I made it, it kind of inspired me, you know, to continue kind of listening to my dreams and perhaps, you know, make, you know, a trilogy of dream short films.
Interesting. So ironically, the short film format allowed you to continue filmmaking when you were not up for a large project. However, it was a really large project in a certain way.
I know it was really hard.
Yeah.
Different
set of challenges.
Yes, well, yeah, obviously, I mean, live action documentary is so different from animation. Yes.
Indeed, yes. Miguel and Luis, would you like to comment on choosing the short film format?
Yeah, I just want to comment really quick. Lourdes, your dream touched me as well. It was very beautiful. And both my grandparents and my mother is deceased, and just seeing that, it was just very beautiful to see. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then in terms of the short film format for this particular film, in the past, I've been an actor since I was 15, and I was mostly producing, which I had, I produced a feature film, and then I was, co-producer on a few other ones, but I never really had dove into directing, but it was something that was always itching. And until Luis and I started our company, Aldana Alchemy, in 2018, that's when, we had our first feature, I'm sorry, our first short, and then ACUITZERAMO is the second short, but they are connected. It is in the same world of Anthony's character. So the idea was to do a trilogy of these shorts because we do want to develop ACUITZERAMO into a feature film. And we also have a TV show that is in the same world of that, this Mexican-American man who's, raising a child with his boyfriend. So yeah, so I think in this case, it was my first shorts in terms of a director. The first short is called Broken Sunflower Hearts, and is actually a prequel to ACUITZERAMO, and that one takes place only in the States. And ACUITZERAMO is the follow-up to that short, which is actually, I'm sorry, ACUITZERAMO is a prequel to that, to Broken Sunflower Hearts. Even I get confused.
Yeah, and I actually watched the trailer for that, and it was really interesting. Now, and it's interesting to understand the broader context of that. So you both have this, the word trilogy is coming up for both of you. That's really interesting. Lourdes, would you like to talk more about the trilogy involving dreams? And, that's it. I guess I'm interested in what it's like to think in chapters like this.
Right. I think, you have to develop a theme or an interest or, something. It takes a place. When I think of a trilogy, it speaks more like a long film. You know what I'm saying? Altogether, they have to have some kind of harmony. And that's the process that I'm going through right now. What is going to be the next one, How is it going to fit in with this film? This is, animation. Is this going to be live action? Or what is it going to be? The questions are out there, and I'm not quite sure, basically. I'm not.
I love I love thinking about that in terms of harmony, versus kind of blatant themes, maybe.
Right.
And your film is so much about, for me, I was also really moved by that. I think it speaks to something in all of us, this internal search for unity. And you can come by that. I see that's a big element of both of your films, however you may come to that question.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good observation about both of them. It's true.
Miguel, can you talk about the dreamscape quality in your film? I really loved these elements of the dancer.
Yeah, so initially I wanted one connecting thread to all three of the shorts. We've done two so far. We're still debating if and when we do the third one. We might end up doing the feature before, but we'll see. But I wanted the connecting thread to be a dance, and that dance was going to be transformative in every short. Initially, I literally wanted Anthony to dance with his father's partner. They just hug and they start dancing, but something wasn't really feeling right. And Luis was the one that actually came up with the idea, and he said, why don't you do a dance from your state, like this baile de los viejitos, which is the dance of the elderly, and try to incorporate that. So from his idea, we started, talking, kind of figuring stuff out. And that dance that ended up in the film traditionally it was only performed, but it's an indigenous dance, but there in Michoacan, which the indigenous people are the Purépechas. And it was only done by elders, and it was done to help the spirit move from the physical state to the spiritual state. So they would guide the spirit when somebody passed. So in the film, it actually worked as they're there to take the father away, but he doesn't want to leave until he knows that his son and his partner, whom he loves, actually make peace. And once that happens and that magical realism comes, and they're there to take him into the spirit space.
That is really beautiful.
And a little side note, I mean, I think thematically we're all talking about the notion of dreams, and that idea that I had, that I shared with Miguel, that eventually became that sequence in the film, came to me in a sort of dreamscape.
Really?
You know, when you're in pre-production, or I was working very closely with Miguel as he was developing the screenplay. One day, that was a question. He was like, there has to be some sort of dance. And then I woke up one day and I was like, oh my God, Miguel, I had this dream, that perhaps maybe it could be in a baile de los viejitos that we can incorporate in that sequence that you're thinking about, and I don't know, I think it worked out pretty organically, pretty poetically, I think.
What do you think is the power of dance in both of these contexts? Lourdes, do you want to speak to that?
I can't tell you. I don't know. I made it up in my dream. It was just like a made up thing that there was a dance and there was music. It must be something very primal,
Yes.
that speaks to us, which I'm beginning to, I believe that you've chosen these two films that are similar in that way, inspired by this kind of otherworldly inspiration, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
one of them is music and dance. But the music and dance that I have in my dream is unlike, I can think of, I don't know why it was an indigenous dance. That's the other thing,
Right.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And in a way, both the characters in ACUITZERAMO and you yourself, Lourdes, in your film, were not able to connect verbally with what you needed to connect to internally. And maybe the dance is this way to rise above words.
Yes, I think so. It becomes a more emotional, more sensitive, sensual way of dealing with things, Yeah, I like that about both films. What a great coincidence.
Yes.
Yeah, and that they're both indigenous dances in the films. That is so wonderful. And I think what Lourdes is saying is absolutely right. It's this emotion. In the first film, when we used the dance, it was their last dance before they actually broke up. They knew that they had to break up. And this one is a different type of emotion. It is a dance that is taking the father away. That's sort of like a dream happening, their spirit kind of just moving through. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, but in all cases, a transformational moment.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes, yes.
So on another subject, you all have in common that you spent your childhoods on both sides of the border. How do you think this developed, this influenced how you developed the characters in your stories, and what kinds of stories you want to tell? And why don't we begin with Luis?
Sure. I think undoubtedly, having grown up I grew up in Mexico City, in this area, northern Mexico, not Mexico City proper, called Coacalco, right? And I was there till about, I'd say, my family migrated in the early '80s. I must have been 6, 7 years old, and so I've been here in Los Angeles ever since, and went to UCLA and, sort of have had my career. absolutely, I think it's something such at the core of myself, of my artistic self, my intellectual self, my spiritual self, that whether I like it or not, I think it's going to forever influence the stories that I tell, that Miguel and I have told collaboratively, in the years that we've been working together. And I think that and a quick little side note, to be on a panel with Lourdes Portillo is a big it's a special moment for me to be sharing the screen, I guess, with her, because she was she has been one of the guiding sort of lights in terms of an artist whose work I've followed over the years. And Señorita Extraviada I think represents so much about this question that you're asking, and I think for myself and for Miguel and I, the work that we're telling and that we intend to tell very much lives in that border, very much lives in that sort of border consciousness. Like, what is that? Having grown up in Mexico, but left at a very young age, and now existing here in the United States, where frankly, our stories are still very much I would say in the margin, even after so many years, so I think that sort of border consciousness, that duality, we have to continue to push, and I think with ACUITZERAMO, we touched upon that a little bit, at joining, a queer elder with another gay man who's younger, who's significantly younger, and that disconnect is very real, I think, in our community, queer or otherwise, that we constantly have to bridge, generationally, but also I think nationally, and I think that's one of the driving forces. I think, the other projects that we're writing inevitably are infused with that reality. Miguel and I, his parents were farm workers. My mom used to clean houses here in the West Side, and that will be, I think, forever linked until we decide not to tell that story anymore. But I think that reality, from our perspective, having grown up in California, that it continues to be true, and I think it'll affect the sort of the content that we're making. Absolutely.
Speaking, I'm thinking of the two characters in the film, Anthony and Salvatore, as two parts of the same person, right. Like in this context of all of your own actual experiences.
Right.
Lourdes, would you like to speak to that? It's been such a huge influence, I think.
Well, I think it is so touching to hear him, talk about his parents and living in this in-between world that we live in, because we are immigrants and because we've had such a unique experience in Mexico and in the United States, then when we are so intimately linked, and it's almost feels like I want to cry, because those stories are so profound. And I think that so many people can gain from listening to our experiences that sound very pedestrian in a way, but in another way, they're totally emotionally profound. And our understanding not only of our own culture, but even other cultures. Mm-hmm. And what I find so touching about this is that, you guys and myself live in the in-between world. And to tell that story requires a lot of work and a lot of understanding from the audience. And we have to reach that audience and make them understand, what it's like to be living in this or what is it called, Nepantla, right? Which
Right,
is
exactly.
the between world.
Mhm.
Yes, and because cinema can be very crass,
Right.
you know, very, very crass and very simple. And I think that this experience enables us to be in a more profound level and a more touching level. And that's not to flatter ourselves, but it's the nature of what we've gone through,
Right.
you know?
It's deeply nuanced. It is not.
Yes.
Yeah. Like Luis said, my parents were farm workers, so they would come here for the season and then they would move back to Mexico. So till I was 14, I lived here for 6 months and we'd move back for 6 months, and I went to school in both countries.
And that's a
So
unique experience and different.
yeah, yeah, and
Luis
it's
and Lourdes.
because, you know, my parents couldn't necessarily afford to live here year round because the season was over, so they had to go back and go to their house in ACUITZERAMO. And, you know, after 14, I was here and I considered myself, you know, part of this culture in terms of like, oh yeah, I'm from California, I'm from Oxnard, from LA. And then people would ask me, where are you from? I'm like, oh, I'm Mexican. I'm, you know, that's my background, but I'm Mexican. So then I go to Mexico, and especially when we take our films out there, I'm petrified because I don't dominate the language. So they're like, oh, you're kind of pocho, or you're more American. I'm like, I guess so. And then being here, it's like, oh, where are you from? You're not American. So it's this kind of like in between that we're living in, that you're like, there's a saying like, ni de aquí ni de allá. And it's a saying that's like, you're neither from here nor from there. And it's this sort of in between, like on the fence.
And this has an external, I'm imagining this has an external quality and an internal quality. So, you know, it's how you relate to people who have a different experience, who grew up in one place and are not divided, you know, don't have the divided experience. And then also how you relate internally to these different parts of yourself.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think, and you know, just to add what Lourdes said, I think that she points out to something very key, that as we tell these stories, the universality of it really lies in that emotional landscape, that what Lourdes said, you know, that's how you are able to connect to a, you know, a wider audience that have no concept of what, you know, the reality of the stories that we speak about, but that emotional nuance, that emotional truth is really what links, you know, everything. And then you're able to create those bridges, you know? So yeah, it's very important.
And I think that, you know, so many people have internal division of something that is a deeply human quality, is, you know, internal division of some kind. You know, having a part of yourself separate from another part of yourself, and the work of unifying yourselves, which is in all of these films so deeply.
I think more of it is a superpower.
Say more about that.
Huh?
Superpower, did you say?
It's a superpower because you can understand anybody from another country that has immigrated or that has gone through the experiences we've gone through. You know, that we had to learn 2 languages, that we had to master the 2 languages, that we had to master the cultures. You know, there's something very beautiful about it too. I find it. Aside, it's not pain. I mean, there was pain, but at the end of the day, it's an asset. It's an enormous asset.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yes.
I had a couple of questions about some specific parts of ACUITZERAMO. Miguel, I'm wondering if you could talk about your very personal relationship to the town of ACUITZERAMO, and then also why you chose to name the film ACUITZERAMO.
So yes, ACUITZERAMO is a small town in the state of Michoacan, which is geographically, I guess, because people know these cities, it's north of Mexico City and south of Guadalajara. So that's a very small town. I grew up there. My parents, grandparents were from there, and they were, like I said, migrating back and forth. When we finished the film, I was trying to find a title, and we tested a lot of titles with Luis, and it just wasn't sticking, and we weren't finding anything. And then it occurred to us that perhaps we should just name it ACUITZERAMO. And ACUITZERAMO is part the Purepecha indigenous language, and then it's part Spanish. So Acuitze means a snake or serpent, and and then amo is like king or master, and the title together means a serpent will be king. And I loved it when we started deconstructing it, because we felt that in the story, Salvador, you know, is being himself initially. The whole town is sort of like, you get a sense that there's homophobia all around him. And by just continuing to be who he is, in the end, you get a feeling that he's transforming the town and it's going to change. So I loved it because, you know, a snake in a spiritual context, it really means rebirth or shedding the past or moving, transforming something. So we just, you know, we debated because we thought nobody's going to be able to pronounce it. And then we came to the idea and we're like, it doesn't matter. It just fits the film. So let's just go with the title. And that's why we kept the title of the actual town, but it has a very deep meaning for the story that we were trying to tell.
And there's that beautiful moment at the very end as Salvatore is walking. Somebody says to him, "Hang in there, Salvatore," or something of that.
Yes,
right.
And we wanted to cast your typical like macho male figure on a horse, you know, like this typical male figure, that he's the one that actually starts to kind of reaching out and accepting him. And yes, I think it was
that's what you'd expect, right?
Yes, exactly.
Luis, I learned that the father-son photo in the film is actually a photo of you and your own dad.
Yes.
Yeah, what was it like to have that photo become a part of the story, and how did that influence how you played Anthony?
Yeah, you know, it was something, you know, as you're moving forward and sort of on this locomotive, you know, with no brakes, as you head into the production, you know, you start pulling, you know, from your own resources and things that seemed to be working. And really it was so interesting the way, you know, it's an interesting anecdote, you know, because sure, we prepared the photo and I told Miguel, hey Miguel, why don't we use this photograph? You know, it's me and my dad, but it wasn't until we were on set that the reality hit. My father disappeared. You know, my father disappeared a year after we migrated to this country. To this day, you know, we unfortunately don't know what happened. But it was really at the onset, as we were getting to roll and shoot that moment between Salvador and Anthony, that the reality hit me. And I remember I had to stop and I told Miguel, I said, Miguel, I'm using this photograph. And he's just like, yeah, what's going on? And I said, my dad, he went missing. Like, and we both froze for maybe 3 seconds. We had the realization, but then the clock is ticking. They're like, okay, guys, we're ready to take. And so it was this very cathartic, but quick moment, you know. And I think it absolutely, on a subconscious level, it fed the emotional sort of drive of that moment in the film, you know. But yeah, I honestly, it wasn't planned, it wasn't premeditated in that way, but it was sort of, I think it's part of the magic of creating something, you know what I mean? That sort of strange, beautiful accident happened. But yeah, so
I have to tell you, I told my husband I was going to ask you that question, but I couldn't get through telling him because I started to cry. I was just so moved by that.
Yeah.
We have time for just a couple more questions. I wanted to ask, you know, Lourdes, I know you recently conducted a series of interviews with Latinx directors for the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences. What Latin American directors do you admire?
That's really a hard question. I admire so many of them for different reasons, you know? It's so hard. I really couldn't say that I admire, you know, 5 of them, you know, I admire like 40 of them,
This is true.
you know, and, oh, Tomás Gutierrez Alea, you know, I admire him profoundly if I were to choose, you know.
And tell me, you know, one aspect of his films that rises to the top for you as an influence.
All of his films really, all of them. But I also like, I feel like bad because I'm leaving out a whole lot of them.
Well, we know it's not in order of preference. They can all be loved equally.
Hierarchically, right? That's true. That's true. That's true. It's a difficult question for me.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah, it's a tough question. Yeah.
Miguel, Luis, would you like to attempt to weigh in on that question?
I actually agree with Lourdes, but I will have to say one of the films that really kind of shook my world that I saw was Luis Buñuel's Los Olvidados. And when I saw that film, it just like blew my mind because I hadn't seen anything like it, and I was, you know, younger. And that's one of the films that actually just stayed in my body, and to this day, it's just stayed in here. The way that he just approached the subject, it was raw. He's actually not Latin American. He actually came from Spain to do films, but a lot of time he focused in Mexico specifically to make a lot of his films. But that's one of the films that came out of Mexico that I felt like at an early age, like I said, it really, really influenced me. And I still carry it inside me because it was just like such an amazing transformation as an aspiring filmmaker.
Quite a dreamlike quality. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, I think I have one. He's a young, new filmmaker. His name is Omar Zuniga. He's a Chileno, and his film is actually doing the festival circuit in tandem with ACUITZERAMO. But I got to see his film. The name of the film is Los Fuertes, and it's a queer story about these Chilenos that, you know, meet up at in a small fishing town in southern Chile. But I'm very intrigued and curious to see what kind of work Omar is going to be doing in the future. Yeah.
Thank you. So we need to wrap it up. Any final comments, new projects in the wings you'd like to talk about? And we'll begin with Lourdes.
Oh, yeah.
Sacrifice me. Go ahead. I am doing a very, very small short film that's not one of the dreams, but it's more of an installation, and it has to do with the homeless people in San Francisco. You know, yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. Right, you know, it's going to be very short. It's going to be an installation, but it's very profound. And that's what I love about it.
That sounds beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, you know,
And
a way of seeing. It's a way of seeing people.
When, where are you in that project? When will that be ready for people to see?
Conceivably, probably in a month's time.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Right.
wow.
Thank you.
It's just short. It's, you know, bang, bang. That's it.
Miguel?
Luis and I are actually talk about diving into ourselves and kind of like really exposing us. We're writing a story called Angel in Retrograde. It's the feature that we want to push. And it's about a 40-year-old man who suffers a massive accident and he's diagnosed with retrograde amnesia. So he can't remember the last 20 years of his life. He can't remember his wife or his daughter. And in the process of rediscovering himself, he realizes he's been living the last 20 years in the closet. So that's the story that we're really, really pushing. And we talk about, you know, what we grew up with, which was homophobia, toxic masculinity, Catholicism, everything that we've experienced on both sides of the border will be in this film.
That sounds really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great
Well,
cocktail.
we wanted, Filmfest DC wants to thank you for being with us. We wish you all the very best in your projects, and we're just so thrilled that we were able to include these films in this year's festival. Thank you.
I'm honored
Thank you so much.
with all the other guests.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting us.
Our pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.